I first heard the Bone Orchard train on the night my mother died, though at the time I didn't understand what the sound meant. The storm had been shaking the windows so violently I thought the glass would burst inward, and the sky flashed white every few seconds, like someone kept striking a match just above the roof. Somewhere between the thunder and the rain, I heard something else. A long, low moan of metal on metal, stretching through the night like a rusted violin bow dragged across ancient strings. I remember sitting upright in bed, heart hammering, wondering why a train would be running in the middle of a storm like that. The nearest tracks had been abandoned since before I was born. They curled through the empty fields behind our town like the spine of some colossal dead animal. The rails warped, the wooden ties disappearing under weeds and moss. People said the line had been shut down after a landslide decades ago. Others whispered it had been something else, something no one wanted to talk about. But on that night, the sound was unmistakable. A train. Slow. Approaching. I didn't see it then, only heard it, only felt the strange pressure in the air, like the storm had suddenly held its breath. If I had looked outside that night, maybe things would be different. Maybe I wouldn't be writing any of this. Maybe I wouldn't be haunted every time it rains. But I was a child, terrified and confused, and when the phone rang downstairs, my uncle calling about a body, I forgot all about the moaning of unseen wheels. It wasn't until years later that I learned storms were its signal. And it wasn't until the storm last winter that I finally boarded it. I suppose I should start with the days leading up to it. The ones when the sky kept threatening to split open, and the air felt too heavy to breathe. There's a certain pressure before a violent storm, if you've ever felt it, you know. Animals go silent. The wind stops moving. Even your thoughts feel muffled, as if something unseen is leaning over your shoulder, listening. That week, the pressure didn't go away. It just built and built, like the sky was swelling, ready to burst. I had returned to my hometown after 18 years. I didn't want to, but my uncle had died suddenly. An aneurysm, they said, quick and merciful, and I was the last family member who could sort his belongings. I didn't have much reason to refuse. No job to rush back to, no partner waiting for me, no real purpose at all. So I packed a small suitcase and took the bus back to the town I swore I'd never step foot in again. I stayed in my uncle's old farmhouse on the hill. Creaked at night, the way old houses do, but it wasn't the creaking that kept me awake. It was the storms that kept circling the horizon, never quite arriving, growling like some great animal pacing in the dark. On the third night, the first drops of rain finally fell. Huge, heavy, and cold. I heard them splatter against the tin roof as I sorted through boxes in the attic. Most were full of junk. Receipts from decades ago, rusted tools, faded photographs, and yellowed newspapers from storms long past. But at the bottom of one box, beneath a stack of old maps, I found a leather-bound journal. The cover was cracked and stiff, the pages smelling faintly of dust and earth. My uncle's handwriting filled the first page, but it was shaky, rushed, unlike his usual neat script. If someone finds this, do not follow the train. Do not listen when it calls. Do not step onto the tracks. Once it chooses you, you are already halfway gone. I felt a chill move through me despite the attic's heat. I turned the page. There were drawings, charcoal sketches of a train unlike any I'd ever seen. Its cars were ribbed like the bones of a creature, and the engine had a long, yawning mouth instead of a standard front. Spines jutted from the roof like broken teeth. It looked more like something grown than built. Beneath the drawings were notes. Arrives only during storms. Tracks appear where none exist. Passengers never return. Built from remnants. Words smeared where the ink had run. The storm outside grew louder, the wind beginning to lash at the house. Thunder cracked so close it rattled the glass. Something about the air changed then. Thickened, deepened, as if the storm had suddenly taken a step closer. I heard it again. That moan. Long, metallic, echoing across the fields. My breath stopped. I went to the attic window, hands shaking, and pulled aside the dusty curtain. At first, all I saw was the storm. Sheets of rain slashing the fields, lightning crawling across the sky like glowing veins. Then the lightning illuminated something impossible. Tracks that hadn't been there the day before, or any day of my life, stretched across the soaked grass, glistening wet under the stormlight. They were straight and dark, like veins carved into the earth. And at the far end of them, something was coming. I saw lights first, not the warm yellow glow of normal train. Lamps but pale, flickering orbs that drifted like will-o-wisps. Then I heard the wheels, grinding slowly, hungrily, as the thing dragged itself forward through wind and rain. My uncle's journal trembled in my hands. He had known. He had seen this. Maybe he had boarded it too once, or perhaps it had come for him but he refused to go. I should have turned away. I should have closed the curtain and buried the journal and locked every door in the house. But the moment I saw that ghostly shape moving through the darkness, something inside me shifted. It was like a string I didn't know existed had been plucked, resonating with the storm. The train was calling me, and I needed to answer. The first thunderclap that shook the house snapped me back to my senses. I stumbled away from the window, heart thundering in my chest, and pressed my back against the wall. My breath trembled out of me in shallow gasps. "No," I whispered out loud. "No, I'm not going out there. I'm not. I won't." But even as I said it, another part of me was already walking toward the staircase, my muscles tingling with the strange certainty that I was meant to follow. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, the storm blew the front door open as if welcoming me. Cold wind rushed inside, flinging rain into the hallway. The tracks gleamed faintly in the distance. The pale orbs of the train's lights glowed larger now, closer, shifting through sheets of rain like eyes watching me, waiting. I stepped onto the porch, soaked instantly, the journal still clutched in my hand. One more thought crossed my mind before the wind swallowed it. This is how it begins. The rain hit me so hard it felt like 1,000 tiny stones. The wind whipped at my clothes and hair, trying to push me back into the house, or maybe trying to push me forward toward the tracks. Thunder rolled overhead in waves, constant and suffocating, as if the sky itself were grinding its teeth. The lights of the Bone Orchard train flickered in the distance, weaving through the rain like lanterns held by invisible hands. With each step I took down the mud-slick hill, the ground seemed to hum under my feet, a low vibration that buzzed through my bones. By the time I reached the edge of the field, the tracks were right in front of me, wet, gleaming, impossibly real. They hadn't been there earlier. I knew that with a certainty that bordered on panic. Yet they stretched now like a black scar through the grass, leading toward the hulking shape that was almost close enough to make out. The train slowed as it approached, its metal groaning, steam hissing from between the bone-like ridges along its sides. Lightning flashed again, and I finally saw it clearly. It wasn't made of wood or steel. It was made of remains. The engine was long and skeletal, like the skull of something that had once been alive, huge, ancient, and furious. Its mouth-like front opened and closed slightly, as if tasting the air. The windows along the cars glowed with sickly white light, flickering like trapped souls. The walls of the cars looked like they were constructed from bones fused together, rib cages interlocking to form arches, vertebrae stacked along the roof. A train built from remnants of forgotten civilizations, that's what the journal had said. But these weren't just remnants. These were bodies. Human? Animal? Something older? I didn't know. The train screeched to a halt before me, throwing sparks that hissed in the rain. A door slid open with a grinding sound, like stone dragged across a grave. Cold, pale light spilled out onto the wet ground. And then I saw him. A conductor, if you could call him that, stood in the doorway. He wore a dark coat and a cap, both tattered as if pulled from a time long past. But his face was wrong. Too pale, too smooth, too still. His eyes did not blink, though rain ran over them in rivulets. His voice, when it came, sounded like wind moving through a hollow space. "Ticket." I stared at him, soaked, trembling, clutching the journal to my chest. I don't have one," I managed to say. He tilted his head, the movement too sharp, too precise. "You were called," he said. "That is enough." He offered a hand. His glove was drenched, but no raindrops clung to it. Every instinct in me screamed to run. But something deeper, much deeper, pulled me forward. I reached out. Our hands touched. His grip was ice cold, but strangely steady. The moment his fingers closed around mine, the storm sound dimmed, like the world had been muffled inside a thick blanket. He guided me up the steps. The air inside the train was cooler still, smelling faintly of dust, rust, and something sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in a sealed tomb. As soon as both my feet were inside, the door slammed shut with a finality that echoed through the car. The conductor stepped past me without another word, his boots tapping rhythmically against the bone-like floor. The train lurched, then began to move. Took a seat near the window, not because I wanted to see what passed by outside, but because there was nowhere else that seemed remotely safe. Not that any part of the train felt safe. The seats were cushioned but old, and beneath the fabric I could feel hard curves, like knuckles or joints pressing back. There were other passengers. At first, I thought they were just people sitting quietly in their seats, staring ahead. A woman in a wide-brimmed hat, her hands folded neatly in her lap. An elderly man with deep wrinkles, his cane leaning beside him. A child clutching a wooden toy. But they didn't move, not even to breathe. Their chests didn't rise or fall. Their eyes didn't blink. Some stared forward. Some stared at nothing. One seemed to stare right at me, until I realized her glassy pupils didn't shift at all. A jolt went down my spine. I whispered, "Hello." No one answered. The train's wheels clicked into a steady rhythm, the storm outside dissolving into a blur of black and lightning. I opened my uncle's journal again, flipping through pages with numb fingers. One passage drew my attention. The passengers you see are only shapes of those who boarded before. They are not alive. They are not dead. They are echoes trapped between realms. I looked up slowly. Echoes. The woman in the hat. The old man. The child. Echoes of travelers who never returned. A weight settled in my gut, cold and heavy. I turned another page. My uncle's handwriting grew slanted, frantic. The Bone Orchard is not a place. It is a memory, a graveyard built from the remnants of worlds that time abandoned. If you reach it, you will see bones of cities, bones of empires, bones of gods. You will walk through the ruins of things that should not be remembered. The train rattled violently for a moment, startling me. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the pale faces of the passengers. Their eyes caught the light, shimmering like pearls. The child's wooden toy, some kind of carved bird, twisted slightly in his motionless hand, as if it had shifted of its own accord. My throat went dry. I closed the journal, clutching it tightly. I didn't know why the train had called me. I didn't know why I followed. But as the train picked up speed, the storm fading behind us, I realized something with slow, creeping dread. The Bone Orchard wasn't ahead. It was already here, in the walls, in the seats, in the silence of the passengers, in the very bones of the train itself. And I was now part of its journey, whether I wanted to be or not. The farther we traveled, the stranger the world outside became. The storm dissolved entirely, leaving a pale, sickly sky beyond the window, one with no clouds, no sun, no stars. Just a washed-out color like bone soaked in old water. The landscape itself shifted in jagged patterns. Mountains rose and fell in impossible time, as though the earth were breathing. Rivers split and curled backward against their own currents. Forests appeared in the distance, then dissolved into ash as though time were stuttering. Every time I blinked, something had changed. Yet inside the train, everything remained eerily still. The passengers did not move. The air didn't stir. Even the flickering light bulbs did not swing with the train's shaking. They hung rigid, as if frozen in place. I felt as though I were inside a ribcage, and the world outside was some immense creature exhaling. The conductor appeared at the end of the aisle. I hadn't heard him approach. He simply stood there, gloved hands resting behind his back, head slightly tilted. His voice echoed faintly, as if spoken across a cavern. "You should prepare yourself. We approached the threshold. What threshold? I asked, my voice barely steadier than a whisper. His face didn't change. It was so still I wondered whether it was a face at all, or a mask pulled too tightly over something else. The place where the living forget their life, he said, and the dead remember theirs. That made no sense, and yet a shiver went through me as though my bones recognized the truth of it. He continued, your uncle crossed it once. My breath caught. He boarded this train? The Bone Orchard calls many. Few resist. He was one of them. I leaned forward despite myself. But he got off? He came back. The conductor lowered his gaze slightly, as though considering how much to reveal. He stepped off before the orchard itself. That is rare. Dangerous. It leaves a mark. I thought of my uncle's journal. The frantic handwriting. The warnings. What kind of mark? The conductor did not answer. Instead, he reached out a gloved hand toward the window. Outside, the landscape had shifted again. Now there were bones. Miles and miles of them. Spines of creatures larger than skyscrapers sprawled across the horizon. Ribcages curled like fallen arches. Skulls, massive, hollow-eyed, cracked open, rested on their sides like abandoned temples. Some were human-shaped but impossibly large. Others had too many jaws, too many. You can replace this text with any text you wish. You can either write in this text box or paste your own text here. Try different languages and voices. Change the speed and the pitch of the voice. You can even tweak the SSML, speech synthesis markup language, to control how the different sections of the text sound. Click on SSML above to give it a try. Enjoy using text-to-speech. Black residue on the seat. The shrieking echoed around the car as the shadows outside the windows recoiled, contorting in the stark light before sinking back into the pale bone forests. Then silence. I barely realized I was shaking until I looked down at my hands trembling violently over the journal. The conductor was suddenly beside me, not approaching, just appearing. You remain intact, he said, as though mildly surprised. What were those? I whispered. Forgotten things, he replied. Leftovers from worlds that have been devoured. They cling to whatever passes through the orchard. They hunger for memory. I swallowed hard. Memory? He nodded once. Memory is nourishment here. It feeds the orchard. It feeds those that dwell in its marrow. I clutched the journal tighter. What does any of this have to do with me? Why was I called? Why did it pick me? The conductor tilted his head slightly, his movements always too mechanical, too deliberate. Because you carry something with you, something the orchard wants. I froze. His voice lowered. A memory it has forgotten. I felt the world tilt sideways. What memory? He didn't answer then. Instead, he stepped away, his long coat trailing behind him like a shadow peeling from the floor. We are nearing the station, he said. Prepare yourself. I stood shakily, bracing a hand against my seat. Where are you going? I'm not ready for whatever this is. You were chosen, he repeated simply. Ready or not is irrelevant. He walked toward the front of the car, passing each motionless passenger. Their glassy eyes reflected the flickering lights, their bodies still as mannequins. A woman with braided hair stared at nothing, her lips parted slightly. The old man's hands were clenched around his cane as though mid-strike. The child's toy bird hung from his fingers, its painted wings cracked. Echoes. Not alive. Not dead. Trapped. My uncle's words in the journal pulsed in my mind. Once it chooses you, you are already halfway gone. My stomach twisted. When the conductor disappeared behind a ribbed doorway leading into the next car, I sank back into my seat, trying to steady my breath. Outside, the orchard grew denser. Bone towers rose like skyscrapers built from skulls stacked one atop another. Massive vertebrae spiraled into arches, forming bridges between mountain-sized ribs. Strange pale trees grew in perfect circles, their branches shaped like fingers reaching upward in prayer or warning. Then, in the distance, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A structure, a massive one, like a train station but built from bones. Its pillars were femurs the size of clock towers. Its roof was a vaulted dome of ribcages crossing in elegant arcs. Countless skulls lined its walls like lanterns, their hollow eyes glowing faintly. Through the haze of the orchard's dim light, I could see other tracks converging toward it, spine rails just like the ones we rode on, and other trains, some long abandoned, nothing but skeletal husks half-eaten by the landscape. Others crawling with those shadow creatures that had tried to break in earlier. One train, a massive serpentine thing, slithered along its track like a living beast. The Bone Orchard Station. The train began to slow. My pulse quickened in time with its decreasing rhythm. Passengers around me remained motionless, unbothered. But I felt something shifting deep inside me, like a memory stirring beneath layers of dust I didn't know were there. The journal vibrated slightly in my hands. A single page, half-torn, fluttered on its own. I looked down. The passage was one I hadn't noticed before, written hastily, in smaller, more desperate handwriting. If it calls you, it means the orchard remembers you. But not everything it remembers is true. Another line beneath it: do not trust your own memories once you arrive. The train screeched, sparks flying against the bone track. We were arriving. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Then, as the train crawled toward the platform, I saw something that nearly made me scream. Standing on the station platform, waiting for my train, was my mother, dead 18 years, alive, smiling, and motioning for me to step off. For a moment, the world narrowed to a single impossible point. My mother. She stood on the bone-white platform as though she had never died, her figure illuminated by the pale glow rising from cracks in the station floor. She wore the same coat she'd had the night she left the house for the final time, a deep green one with a missing button near the collar. Her hair was pulled back in the same braid she always wore on rainy nights. Her expression held that same gentle tiredness, like someone carrying a weight too big for their frame but determined to walk anyway. The station, the train, the bones, none of it existed for that one breath. Only her. My legs moved before I could think. I stood, nearly stumbling into the aisle. "Mom!" Her head lifted at the sound of my voice, and she smiled, just like she used to, warm, soft, a smile that forgave everything. That smile nearly broke me. I took a step toward the train door, then another. The other passengers didn't move, didn't react. They remained frozen echoes as the train hissed to a halt. The ribs along the walls shuddered with a grinding sigh, as though exhaling ancient air. The door slid open. Cold wind rushed in, carrying the scent of dust and old flowers. I stepped toward the opening, but the conductor appeared suddenly at my side, materializing out of thin air with a sound like bones clicking into place. His gloved hand shot out, gripping my arm. "Do not," he said sharply. "Step off this train for her." I stared at him, bewildered, angry, terrified. "Let go of me. That's my mother." "That is not your mother. She's right there. She is a memory the orchard has stolen," he said, voice low, urgent. "Twisted, reassembled, fed your shape, fed your grief." My pulse thundered in my ears. "No. No, I remember her. Memory is currency here," he cut in. "The orchard feeds on what you recall. It will show you what you want most, and then it will consume you for wanting it." My breath faltered. On the platform, my mother, the thing wearing her face, lifted a hand and waved. Slowly, almost hesitantly, exactly the way she had when she used to pick me up from school. Tears blurred my vision. "How do I know you're not lying?" I whispered. The conductor's grip tightened. "Because if you step off, you will never come back." Outside the door, my mother's lips parted. She called my name, the exact way she had called it the night she died. My legs buckled. The conductor leaned close, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Ask yourself, how would she be here? Why would she wait 18 years in a realm built from the bones of things forgotten? Look deeper. Do not see her face. See what lies behind it." I forced myself, shaking, unwilling to look again. This time, I didn't focus on her eyes or her smile. I looked at her shadow. It was wrong. Too long, too thin, too restless, shifting in a slow ripple, like something crawling within it. When lightning flashed across the orchard's distant horizon, the shadow twisted, revealing dozens of small, grasping hands inside it. I staggered backward, choking on a gasp. My mother, the not mother, smiled wider, the corners of her lips stretching past their natural limits. The conductor pulled me fully back from the doorway. The creature stepped closer to the platform's edge, reaching its hands toward the train. And then, something enormous shifted beneath the station. The bones trembled. Dust rained from the ribcage roof. A low groan rose from deep beneath the platform, shaking the entire structure. My not mother froze mid-step. The conductor let go of my arm and straightened. "We are summoned," he said. Summoned. By what? I barely had the thought when the train lurched forward suddenly, pulling away from the station with a violent jolt. The door slammed shut, cutting off the sight of the creature wearing my mother's face. The figures on the platform began to ripple, their shapes warping, melting, turning into distorted silhouettes. And then the train shot away into the dark, bone-filled horizon. I collapsed into the nearest seat, shaking uncontrollably, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The conductor watched me, face impossibly still. "You understand now," he said, "why the orchard wanted you to step off." I wiped tears from my cheeks with the back of my hand. "Why? Why does it want me? What did I do?" "You carry a memory it has not had access to, a memory it lost long ago." He paused. "And it wants it back." I stared at him. "What memory?" He tilted his head. "The one you buried. The one you've spent your life avoiding. The night your mother died." My blood turned to ice. I know what happened. She was caught in the flood." Everyone said, "No." The conductor said softly, "That is the story you were given, not the memory you refused to see." The journal felt heavy in my hands, its pages vibrating faintly with the rumble of the train. "What are you saying?" I whispered. The conductor stepped back into the aisle. "We are going to the place that holds it." "The place that holds what?" He turned slightly, his pale eyes fixing on mine. "The truth." The train plunged deeper into the orchard, heading toward a place the conductor called the archive. A place where the memories of dead civilizations and dead people were kept in the bones of the world. And somewhere within that labyrinth of echoes and remains was the memory I had spent my entire life running from. The memory the orchard wanted. The memory it would do anything to reclaim. The word archive lingered in my mind long after the conductor left the car. Felt heavy, final, like something that was never meant to exist within a human understanding. The train's pace quickened again. Bone structures blurred past the windows in streaks of pale ivory. Skulls, the size of boulders, rolled lazily through fields of ribcages. Enormous femurs formed archways so tall they cut through the sky's dim horizon. But the air inside the train was still. Too still. I looked around at the passengers, the echoes. Their stiff forms were unchanged, their eyes blank. Only one thing was different. The child's wooden bird toy had shifted in his hand. It now pointed toward the aisle. I blinked hard. No, no way. I looked again. The bird was unmistakably pointing. Its tiny carved beak angled down the aisle, toward the front of the train, the direction the conductor had gone. As though something wanted me to follow. My heart drummed against my ribs. I squeezed my eyes shut once, opened them again. The arm of the child jerked. Only a millimeter. But enough. Enough to make bile rise in my throat. The echoes weren't dead. They weren't alive. But they reacted. They reacted to me, to what I carried, to the memory the orchard wanted. My legs trembled as I stood. I held the journal against my chest like a shield, breathing shallowly. The aisle stretched before me like the throat of some vast creature waiting to swallow me. I stepped forward. The moment my foot touched the aisle, every head of every passenger snapped toward me. I froze. Their movements were simultaneous, mechanical, like puppets yanked by an invisible string. Their eyes, glassy, unfocused, locked on me. Their mouths stretched open, slow and wide, as if each one was about to swallow a scream that had been trapped inside their hollow chests for decades. But none made a sound. They simply watched. Then, as though satisfied, they turned their heads back into their frozen positions. I stumbled forward, almost collapsing. My breath came shallow and ragged as I reached the ribbed door the conductor had passed through. It shuddered open as I approached. The next car was darker, lit only by faint, bioluminescent threads running along the ceiling, resembling veins. They pulsed faintly, like a slumbering heartbeat, and hanging from them like lanterns were bones. Hundreds of bones, suspended by tendrils of pale sinew. Skulls, ribs, femurs, spines, all swaying with the rhythm of the train's movement. I swallowed back a gag. In the center of it all, the conductor stood. He turned to face me, his expression as unreadable as ever. "You should not be here. Yet I knew you would come. You said I have something the orchard wants," I said, voice shaking. "A memory, a truth. If you want me to survive this, tell me what it is." He took one step closer, the bones overhead rattling faintly. "You cannot survive the archive with answers I give you," he said. "Only with answers you give yourself." "That doesn't help," I snapped, frustration burning in my throat. "If something is hunting my memories, I need to know which ones." He regarded me calmly. "You think it hunts all your memories?" A chill washed over me. "What do you mean?" "It wants one," he said. "Only one. One you refuse to recall." My grip tightened on the journal. "What happened the night your mother died?" I shook my head violently. "She drowned in the flood. I was told she slipped. She—" "No," his voice cut through mine with a sharp finality. "That is the story, not the memory." Something in the car shifted. A skull overhead rotated slowly to face me. The lights dimmed, veins pulsing faintly faster. "This won't work," I whispered. "I wasn't there. I didn't see it." "Didn't you?" the conductor asked quietly. The floor beneath my feet vibrated. A low hum crawled through the car. I staggered backward, gripping the wall. Images flickered across my vision. Water, screaming, a hand reaching for me. Gone so fast I couldn't grasp them. What is that?" I gasped. "The memory pressing through," the conductor said. "This part of the orchard senses it. It wants you to see." "I don't want to see," I whispered. "But you must." The hum grew louder. The bones overhead swayed more violently. A skull dropped slightly, hanging inches above my shoulder, its jaw creaking open, and suddenly the train jerked forward, throwing me against the wall. The conductor didn't move. "We are close now," he said. "Close to what?" He turned slowly toward the front of the train. "To the place where memories go to die." The next jolt rattled the car, bones swinging in chaotic motion. Something shrieked outside, a long, throaty wail that vibrated through my bones. And then the lights went out. A darkness thicker than anything yet swallowed the car. I heard breathing. Not mine. Not the conductor's. Something else. A whisper brushed against my ear. "You left her." My heart stopped. It was my mother's voice. "You left me in the water." "No." My voice cracked. "No, I didn't." "You ran." The whisper continued, softer now. "You watched me fall." "I didn't." My knees buckled. "I wasn't even there." The darkness pressed tighter around me. "You remember," the voice breathed. "You remember everything." Something cold slid across my wrist, like fingers made of wet stone. The conductor spoke somewhere in the black, his voice the only anchor left. "Do not answer it." But the whisper coiled around my mind like a rope tightening. "You remember," it said again. "You remember how I died." The train lurched violently. Light exploded back into the car. And I saw, just for a fraction of a second, my mother's face inches from mine. But wrong. Eyes hollow, mouth split too wide, hands reaching. And then she vanished. My scream tore free. The conductor caught my arm before I collapsed. "You must hold yourself together," he said. "We are almost at the archive." I stared at him, trembling uncontrollably. What is the archive going to do to me? His expression did not change. It will show you the truth. The truth about what? The truth about your mother's death, he said. And the truth about what you did. The storm thickened until it felt like the sky itself was collapsing. The train groaned beneath me, its ribs flexing like something alive trying to breathe through broken lungs. I pressed my palm against the cold window, but the glass had begun to pulse. Slowly, faintly, like the beat of a heart trapped just beneath the surface. The bone orchard accelerated. Every lantern along the corridor flickered into a sickly, bluish glow. Shadows stretched long and thin across the floor, bending in ways no light should allow. It felt as though the train had slipped from the storm and into something deeper, something older than weather, older even than memory. I sensed someone standing behind me before I heard anything. A whisper, soft as bone dust falling, brushed past my ear. "You're staying longer than the others." I turned. The figure in the aisle wasn't one of the passengers. It wasn't even pretending to be. It had no clear face, just the impression of one, cheekbones shaped from white ash, the faint ridge of a brow made from smudged soot, and eyes like hollow pits that still somehow watched me with unbearable precision. Every time the lantern flickered, the face rearranged itself, as though it was still deciding what it wanted to be. "I didn't choose to stay," I managed. "I need answers." The figure tilted its head as if amused, or confused, or both. "No one arrives on this train by choice. Not truly. The storm calls. The storm selects." "Then why me?" "Because you hear things?" it whispered, stepping closer. "Because the forgotten remember you." Cold spread across my chest like a hand pressing against my ribs from the inside. I backed up until my shoulders hit the window. The figure leaned in. "You don't fear being lost," it murmured. "You fear being found." My breath caught. Found by what? The figure lifted a hand and pointed toward the door at the end of the corridor. The one that had appeared only after the conductor marked my ticket with that bone-white symbol. "By what has been looking for you since the day you first dreamed of us." The lanterns dimmed to near darkness. The train lurched violently. The forward door slid open by itself, exhaling a warm, stagnant breath that smelled of old libraries, rotting timber, and the iron tang of broken monuments buried beneath sand. Beyond the door lay a tunnel of night, a new carriage, a new realm. The figure began to dissolve, its face unmaking itself like dust drifting apart. "Go," it whispered. "It's waiting." The door slammed shut behind me the moment I stepped through. For a moment, I stood in pitch-black silence. Then something clicked like a lock turning, and the world around me ignited in pale, dead light. The new carriage didn't resemble anything I had seen so far. It wasn't a passenger car or a cargo car or anything belonging to a train. It felt implanted, like someone had stolen a fragment of a dying civilization and wedged it between two metal ribs of the bone orchard. Stone pillars lined the walls, cracked, chipped, wrapped in vines made from fossilized roots. The air felt heavy, thick with centuries of dust and echoes. And the floor was covered in bones. Not piled, arranged, patterned. Every step crunched softly yet purposefully, as if I was walking across the remains of a forgotten language. My skin crawled, not because of the bones, because they were warm. The carriage vibrated with a low hum, like something beneath the bones was breathing. Then I heard footsteps, not from ahead, from below. I froze. A slow scrape, a shudder, a shift of weight. Something under the bone floor was moving. I backed up, carefully, quietly, trying not to disturb anything. Too late. The entire floor heaved upward as if something massive was rising beneath it. Bones clattered. The patterned shapes, once orderly, broke apart in a violent ripple. And then a hand, if it could be called that, burst through the floor. A skeletal structure, but thicker, older, layered with petrified growths like tree rings. Each finger moved with dreadful care, brushing the surface as if searching for something. Searching for me. I staggered, back toward the door behind me, but it had sealed into solid wall. The carriage groaned around me. Another hand pushed up through the bones. Then another. Something enormous was pulling itself into the world. The storm outside roared, shaking the walls. The train screamed, an agonized, tortured metallic howl. And from beneath the bones, the creature's head pushed through. A skull carved with symbols that pulsed faintly like dying embers, turned toward me, and it spoke, not in words I understood, but in a voice I recognized, my own. Finally, it said through the grinding of stone and bone, "You've come back." My knees nearly buckled. I don't know you," I whispered. The skull tilted. "You don't remember yet, but you will." The bones around it shivered, lifting into the air as though gravity had been dismissed. The creature rose higher. "You were one of us once," it said, "and you left something behind." My heartbeat hammered painfully. What did I leave? The creature stretched a massive arm toward the far end of the carriage. The bones parted like water, revealing a narrow hallway carved from black stone, lit by a single lantern that flickered with unnatural steadiness. "Your name." The air collapsed out of my lungs, because etched into the lantern's glass, faint but unmistakable, was a symbol identical to the one the conductor carved onto my ticket. Except this one pulsed with heat, like a heartbeat. "Go," the creature rumbled. "If you want to live, if you want to remember." A wave of hot, stale wind blasted from the hallway, and behind me, the skeletal giant began sinking back beneath the floor, vanishing as silently as it had come. The path was open, and the train was waiting. I took a breath, then another, and I walked toward the lantern. The hallway tightened around me as I moved forward, the black stone narrowing until my shoulders nearly brushed both walls. The lantern at the far end swayed slightly, not from any breeze but as if something had just brushed past it, or through it. Its dim flame wavered, casting long, trembling shadows that didn't line up with my movements. I reached out and wrapped my fingers around the lantern's handle. It was hot, too hot to touch, but the heat wasn't burning. It felt like it was pulsing into my skin, syncing itself with the rhythm of my heartbeat. A sound drifted through the tight corridor, a soft humming, a woman's voice. My blood froze. I knew that voice. I had known it my entire life, even though I had never once heard it outside of dreams. She was humming the tune that always came before the storm. The same storm that brought the train. The same storm that took my father. The hallway widened abruptly, opening into a cavernous chamber that should not have fit inside a train car. The ceiling arched impossibly high, covered in carved glyphs I instinctively avoided looking at for too long. They writhed when I didn't focus on them, slithering like shadows caught in a restless dream. At the center of the chamber was a single tree, a tree made entirely of bone. And beneath it, sitting on a seat of intertwined ribs and vertebrae, was the humming woman. She didn't acknowledge me at first. Her hair hung long and dark over her face, strands twitching slightly like they were alive. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, fingers tapping along to some internal rhythm that felt older than language. The lantern in my hand flickered violently, and she stopped humming. "You brought it back," she said. Her voice echoed in the chamber, bouncing against bone. I don't know what this is," I said. "You do," she replied calmly. "You've always known." She lifted her head, and the sight rooted me to the spot. Her face, half of it was mine. Not in some metaphorical, uncanny way. Literally half my face. Same eye, same cheekbone, same mouth, but split down the center, fused to the other half of someone else entirely. The other half was bone. A skull. Smooth, polished, gleaming faintly under the lantern light. The eye socket was empty, but darkness stirred inside it, swirling gently with each movement she made. My stomach twisted. "What are you?" I whispered. She stood, her body tall and unnaturally elegant, every movement accompanied by the soft click of bone plates shifting beneath her skin. "I am the part of you that stayed behind," she said. "When you left the realm of the forgotten, you tore yourself in two." My throat tightened. "I left," the half-faced woman nodded. "You were born here, and the storms were the only way out. But you broke the rules. You escaped without giving back what you owed." My grip tightened around the lantern handle. What did I owe? She motioned to the lantern itself. That, your name. The lantern's heat intensified, searing my palm. You tried to take it with you, she continued. But the Bone Orchard doesn't allow that. Names belong to the realm. Identity belongs to the forgotten. You stole from us. Her empty eye socket tilted slightly. And now you've returned to return it. The chamber's shadows convulsed, coiling like serpents ready to strike. The bone tree behind her creaked, shedding tiny flakes of calcified dust. I didn't steal anything, I said through clenched teeth. I didn't even know this place existed. No, she agreed. You don't remember. But forgetting is not innocence. She stepped forward, each footstep echoing like the closing of a tomb. You were warned. They tried to stop you. The conductor, the guardians beneath the bones. But you ran. You fled into the storm and forced your way into the waking world. She was now only a few feet away. And because of you, she whispered, the realm has been unraveling ever since. The chamber trembled. Bone branches snapped and reformed. Shadows skittered across the floor like blind insects. She reached for the lantern. Give it back. Instinct made me jerk away. No, wait! The lantern flared, blindingly bright, and then the flame elongated, stretching, spiraling, until it became a shimmering thread of white fire connecting my hand to her chest. The force yanked at me, pulling me forward. My breath left my body in a painful rush. The flame thread thickened, pulsed. She smiled. Your name, she whispered, has always belonged to us. The world cracked. The chamber shattered into a million fragments of bone and light, and I fell, through stone, through shadow, through everything, into a memory that wasn't supposed to exist. I was standing at the edge of a storm, not a storm of rain or lightning, a storm of voices, whispering, screaming, begging, thousands of forgotten names spinning like dust in the wind. The sky above glowed with faint, drifting characters, glowing symbols that flickered like dying stars. And I was younger, maybe 12, holding a lantern identical to the one in my hand now. Someone stood beside me, my father. He looked terrified, not for himself, for me. You can't take it with you, he said, gripping my shoulders. If you try, it will hunt you. The Bone Orchard never forgets. But it's mine, I whispered. Why can't I keep it? Because nothing born in the forgotten realm belongs in the waking world. Lightning ripped through the sky, shaped like bone spires. The ground beneath us trembled. We have to go, he said urgently. Now, before it sees us. Before what sees us. I didn't ask. I ran. But my fingers refused to let go of the lantern. The memory twisted, bending, distorting, and the storm swallowed us whole. Then I was back, collapsed on the chamber floor. The lantern lay shattered beside me, its flame threads severed, and the half-faced woman stood over me, looking afraid. You broke it, she whispered. You broke the tether. She reached down not to harm me, but to touch my cheek. You shouldn't have been able to do that. The shadows behind her writhed violently. The bone tree moaned. The entire chamber tilted, as though the train itself was being dragged sideways by a force larger than reality. I staggered to my feet. What happens now? I asked. She stared at the broken lantern. At last, she murmured. The realm has noticed you. The ground split open. A roar, deep, ancient, world-ending, shook the air. And from the fissure beneath the bone tree, something began to rise. Something vast. Something hungry. Something that had been searching for my name since the moment I stole it. The fissure widened with a violent crack, splitting the chamber like a mouth opening in the earth. Hot air blasted upward, thick, metallic, reeking of ancient rot and buried epochs. I shielded my face as bone fragments rained down like hail. The half-faced woman stepped back, her skeletal eye socket flooding with blackness. It woke because of you, she said, voice trembling with something I hadn't thought she was capable of, fear. The realm has found what you took. It is coming to reclaim its debt. A massive shape shifted beneath the cracked floor, too large to fully comprehend. It wasn't rising the way the skeletal guardian had earlier. This thing pressed up on the chamber from beneath, as though the entire realm was a thin sheet barely concealing its presence. Something thudded. Once, twice. A heartbeat big enough to resonate through stone, and bone, and me. The chamber shook with every pulse. "What is it?" I shouted over the deafening rumble. She didn't look at me. The archivist. The word tasted wrong in my ears. Too heavy, too final. As if speaking it was a kind of surrender. "The keeper of all names," she continued. "The one that remembers even the forgotten. It is the only thing that existed before the realm. And it does not allow theft." Another thunderous pulse. The stone ceiling cracked. Glyphs shattered, spilling dust like snowfall. "What does it want?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She turned fully, her half-human face tense, her half-skeletal side blank and unreadable. "You," she said. "It wants you." A massive tendril of bone erupted from the fissure, spiraling upward like a root growing in reverse. It thrashed, smashing through pillars and ripping apart the floor. The entire chamber began collapsing, not down but inward, like the realm was folding itself into the archivist's will. "Run," she whispered. "I can't outrun that." "You won't outrun it?" she said, stepping closer, gripping my wrist with a hand that was warm on one side, icy bone on the other. "But you can outmake it." "What?" She pointed at my chest. "At what you still carry. Your name is broken, shattered. That makes you unpredictable to the archivist." Another tendril lashed upward, splitting the bone tree in two. A shrieking sound poured from the crack like every name ever forgotten was being screamed at once. She yanked me toward the far wall. A doorway flickered there, made of nothing but darkness, pulsing like a wound. "It's a tear," she said, "created when you severed the tether. It leads to the archive's boundary." "Isn't that where it wants me?" "Yes," she said, "but you need to reach it on your terms, not its. If you confront it while your identity is still yours, partially, you might survive." "And if I don't?" The chamber shook violently, and a jaw, an impossibly large bony jaw, rose from the fissure. Rows of ossified teeth scraped against each other in a grinding sound that pierced my skull. The darkness behind the teeth churned like a living void. "If you don't," she said quietly, "it will unwrite you. You will become nothing, less than forgotten. You will have never been." Her words struck deeper than fear. Erasure. Oblivion. The archivist kept pulling itself into the chamber, bone plates unfolding like the shell of some colossal, buried creature. Glyphs burned across its surface, each one a name, each one still screaming. The half-faced woman pushed me toward the doorway of darkness. "Go," she said. "You have a chance." I grabbed her arm. "Come with me." She froze, her half-human eye filled with something human. Her half-skeletal side remained emotionless, but her voice shook. "I cannot. I am bound to the realm. I am what you left behind. If I enter the boundary, I will be consumed." The jaw rose higher. Stone melted under its breath. "But," she added, "you can come back for me, if you survive." The archivist's booming roar erupted, vibrating every atom in the chamber. The fissure widened to reveal more bone, more darkness, more history than should ever exist. The half-faced woman shoved me with all her strength. I stumbled backward into the doorway, and the moment I fell through, the world inverted. I was suspended in an impossible space. Not light, not darkness, something between. A corridor of shifting reality, where time folded like paper and gravity spun like a dying compass. The air hummed with a million voices whispering names. Names, names, spoken and unspoken, rising and falling in a tidal wave of memory. "Welcome." The voice came from everywhere. And nowhere. The archivist. It hadn't followed me through the tear. It had always been here. This was its realm. The true archive. A place where forgotten civilizations were sorted like artifacts, where memories decayed like dead leaves, and where every name that ever existed floated like loose threads in a cosmic loom. Bone platforms drifted in impossible directions. Massive shelves carved from spine columns towered into an infinite sky. Ghostly figures, remnants of erased lives, drifted silently with hollow eyes. And in the center of it all a throne made from the ribs of dead worlds. On it sat the archivist, or the thing that passed for its physical shape. It was vast, a being of bone plates arranged like armor around a void of pure darkness. Thousands of names circled its core, orbiting like dying stars. Its skull-shaped head rotated toward me, hollow eye sockets burning with cold, archival light. "You have brought back what was stolen," it said. "I broke it," I said. "Yes." It didn't sound angry. It sounded curious. "You fractured your name," it continued. "Split your identity. Made yourself unclassifiable." I felt its attention wrap around me like a cold hand. "That makes you interesting." My pulse pounded like a war drum. "What do you want?" "To finish what began when you fled the realm." Its empty gaze deepened. "To claim you. To restore you to your rightful place among the forgotten." No, a ripple of impossible force shook the archive, and the archivist tilted its skull, studying me. "You deny your nature." "I choose my own," I said. The archive trembled again. The archivist rose from its throne, each movement accompanied by a cascade of dissolving names. "You were born of lost civilizations, born of memory. You cannot undo what you are." "I can," I said, "because I broke the rules." The skull leaned close. "And that is why you must be undone." The archive collapsed into motion. Tendrils of bone and shadow launched toward me, screaming with voices that had been dead for ages. And I ran. I ran toward the center of the archive. Toward the only thing the archivist was blind to. Toward the one thing I still carried that even it could not predict. The hole where my name used to be. I didn't know where I was running, because nothing in the archive resembled direction. There was no up, no down, no distance that behaved like distance. Every step bent the world. Every breath tasted like dust scraped from the bones of extinct languages. Behind me, the archivist's tendrils tore through the realm, shredding shelves carved from vertebrae, scattering names like ash. Every name that disintegrated screamed once. Brief, sharp, agonizing before dissolving into nothing. "You cannot escape what you are," the archivist thundered, its voice shaking the archive to its core. "Return what you stole and be unmade." I pushed harder, my legs burning, though there was no ground and no gravity, just the illusion of both. Bone platforms drifted past, turning under me like rotating fragments of lost worlds. I needed somewhere it couldn't predict, somewhere it couldn't see, somewhere fractured, where my missing name created a blind spot. There, a crack in the archive's fabric. Not a doorway, not a tear, a misfiled memory, a mistake. My mistake, the one created when I shattered the lantern. The archivist's roar shook the marrow of the realm. "Enough!" Tendrils of bone lashed toward me. One grazed my ankle, cold, burning like dry ice pressed into flesh. My vision blurred as the tendril tried to pull not my body, but my identity, dragging pieces of me out one by one. My thoughts flickered. My sense of self buckled. For a split second I felt everything I'd ever forgotten. Faces from childhood, moments I never noticed, dreams I didn't recognize, all pulled to the surface in a flood. "No!" I tore my leg free, screaming, and hurled myself into the crack. The world inverted again. Silence, absolute silence, and darkness, the kind that felt alive. I wasn't in the archive anymore. This was deeper, older, a place beneath forgetting, a place no name had ever belonged. I floated weightlessly in a void textured like thick fog, except the fog whispered. Thousands of tiny murmurs brushed against my ears, like voices buried under centuries of dust. A dim shape emerged in the dark. Person, sitting cross-legged on nothing, their face obscured. As I drifted closer, they lifted their head, and my breath stopped. It was me, not the me from now, the me from before, 12 years old, holding an intact lantern. The flame inside my lantern burned steadily, not shattered. My younger self looked exhausted, terrified, but focused, like he'd memorized every second that led to this moment. "You came back," he said quietly. My voice, higher, softer, still shaped by a life I no longer remembered. "Where am I?" I asked. "In the space between being remembered and being erased," the younger me replied. "The archivist can't reach here directly. It's not a cataloged place." "How did I create this?" "You didn't." Faint smile. "You broke something. Breaking things makes cracks. Cracks make doors." The void rumbled slightly, like something massive brushing against the edges of existence. "How do I stop it?" I asked. "You don't." Cold spread through my chest. "Then what do I do?" "You finish what you started the night you ran." I knelt in front of him. "The night with the storm," I whispered. He nodded. "You tried to take your name with you, but names born in the forgotten realm aren't meant to exist outside it." He extended the lantern to me. "Your name didn't break when you ran," he said. "You broke it when you refused to let go. You forced it across the boundary. It split. Half stayed. Half became me." My throat closed around the question. "If I take the lantern, if I take my name, what happens to you?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he inspected the flame, my flame, with a calmness that felt deeply unnatural for a child. "I've been waiting here since the moment you left," he said, "holding the part you abandoned, protecting it, keeping it from fading. But I can't leave this place." He met my eyes. "You can." A heavy silence filled the void. "I don't want you to disappear," I whispered. "You don't get to choose." His face didn't soften. "It's already happening. I'm only here because the archivist hasn't fully unmade the rift yet." The void pulsed again, louder. "What if I don't take the name?" I asked. "Then the archivist takes all of you," he said simply. "I disappear anyway. You disappear. Everything you've ever been erased. And if I take it?" He held the lantern out farther, pushing it into my hands. "If you take it," he said, "I become part of you again. Not a memory, not a ghost, just you." My hands trembled as I touched the lantern. It was warm, alive. The flame brightened at my touch. "I'm afraid," I admitted. He nodded. "I was too. But we already made the choice, remember?" "What choice?" "The choice to be whole." The void cracked. A deafening roar bellowed from beyond the darkness. The archivist forcing its way in. "You're out of time," my younger self said. "Take it. Take it and run." The void shattered like glass, and the archivist's tendrils burst through the cracks. I grabbed the lantern, and the flame surged into me. A flood of light burned through my skull, my chest, my entire being. A name, my name, hammered into existence inside me, reforming from shards. The void disappeared. I was back in the archive, but not as I was. I stood taller, felt heavier, felt whole. The air vibrated. The archivist froze, towering above me, tendrils whipping in shock. "You," it whispered, "you are restored." "Impossible." I stepped forward, and the archive bent around me. Books of bone rearranged themselves. Shelves folded away. Ghosts retreated like mist. "I'm not part of your realm anymore," I said, "and I'm not yours to erase. You cannot defy a primordial keeper." The archivist snarled, rising to its full, impossible height. "I'm not defying you." I reached into my chest, into the place my name now lived, and pulled. Light erupted. Not flame, not memory. Identity, pure and unbroken, exploded outward. The archivist screamed, not in fear, in fury. "You dare bring wholeness into the archive?" It roared. "You split the realm." The archive itself began tearing apart, caught between cataloged law and the presence of something it could not classify. "You wanted my name," I said, stepping forward as light poured from me in waves. "Now choke on it." I thrust the light toward the archivist. It struck the creature's core, the orbiting names shattering like glass, the bone armor cracking, the void inside convulsing, and the archivist began to come undone. Not dying, not breaking, unremembering itself, piece by piece. The scream became a whisper. Its whisper became a breath. This breath became nothing. And then the archivist vanished. The archive collapsed inward, unraveling into darkness. And I fell back toward the realm, back toward the bone orchard, back toward the woman with half my face, back toward the train that should never have carried me. As the world rushed up to meet me, one thought burned in my mind. I had my name, and now I had to decide what to do with it. The breath that escaped me wasn't entirely mine. It shuddered out of me like something older, something that had been hiding in my ribs and waiting for this moment. I pushed forward anyway. The doorway oozed shadow, and the symbols carved into the frame pulsed with a slow, arterial rhythm. Behind me, the train groaned, metal stretching, bone flexing. Felt impatient. I stepped through. The world on the other side wasn't a room at all, but an expanse. A valley carved out of darkness, lit by a sky stitched together from scraps of ruined empires. I saw broken spires hanging like stalactites overhead, fragments of old languages drifting like smoke, and bones, mountains of them, rising and falling like dunes. The air buzzed with memories that weren't mine. Then the whispering began. At first it was distant, harmless, like wind dragging itself over stone. But as I walked deeper into the valley, it sharpened into clarity. Voices overlapping, begging, warning, demanding. They spoke in languages I didn't recognize, yet I understood them all the same. Return what was taken. Walk the path of marrow. Feed the roots. Do not look behind you. Naturally, I looked behind me. A procession was forming. Shapes, some human, some not, watched from the edges of the bone dunes. They stood too still to be alive, but their eyes flickered like lantern flames. One figure stepped closest, tall, robed in the tattered remnants of what might once have been royal garments. A crown of rusted metal and broken ivory circled his skull. When he spoke, it sounded like someone dragging a throne across a stone floor. "You do not belong here. I didn't exactly choose to come," I muttered, though my voice trembled. "You boarded the train," he replied. "That is always a choice." His jaw shifted, cracking. Dust poured from the seams in his face. Something behind his eyes moved like trapped insects. "Why does the train take people here?" I asked. He tilted his head. "Because a realm built on bones must be fed." A chill wrapped around my spine, squeezing. He extended a hand, skeletal fingers bound with strips of dried sinew. "Walk with me. There is more you must see." I didn't want to take his hand. I didn't want to walk with him. But the sky above rippled, and I had the terrifying sense that if I didn't follow, the landscape itself would rise and swallow me whole. So I walked beside him. The dunes shifted as we moved. Bones rattled like wind chimes. Occasionally, a skull cracked under my boot, whispering some last broken echo into the air. "What is this place?" I asked after a while. "The Bone Orchard," he said simply. "Every civilization leaves remains. Ideas, ruins, bodies, histories. Nothing is ever truly lost. It is all harvested here. And the train." He glanced at me, empty sockets glowing. Faintly. "A collector. Ferryman. A reminder. That doesn't answer anything. It answers everything in time." We reached a cliff made of fused vertebrae. He gestured for me to look over the edge. I did, and immediately regretted it. Below lay countless cities, millions, stacked in impossible layers, like someone had taken entire worlds and pressed them together until they formed a single quivering mass. Streets bent in spirals. Towers grew sideways. Cathedrals melted into colosseums. All of it shifting, breathing, alive. And between the cracks, something enormous moved. Its shadow alone swallowed entire forgotten empires. When it breathed, the entire valley exhaled with it. "What is that?" I whispered. "The Eater of Endings," the crowned figure said. "The reason nothing can truly die." I stumbled backward, away from the edge. "Why did the train bring me?" "Because you carry something lost. Something the orchard once returned." A pulse thudded in my chest, but not in my heart. Lower, deeper, something I had never felt before, or maybe something I had spent years pretending not to feel. Before I could speak, the ground trembled. The crowned figure lifted his head sharply. It wakes. What wakes? He didn't answer. His hand seized my arm with a strength that felt like being caught in a vice made of centuries. You must choose, he hissed. Give the orchard what it wants, or be buried within it. What does it want from me? I don't even know what I supposedly took. It is inside you. Has been since the storm that first pulled the train into your world. My blood turned to ice. You mean, that wasn't the first time the train appeared? It has followed you for years. Lightning tore across the sky above, except it wasn't lightning. It was a crack, a fracture ripping open the sewn-together heavens. Through it, I saw the train, our train, preparing to plunge into the realm entirely. The Bone Orchard train is not merely transport, he growled. It is a seeker, and now it has found you. The crowned figure released me. Run. I didn't think. I bolted. The dunes convulsed as something massive stirred beneath them. Skulls burst open. Spines twisted upward like spears. The whispering crescendoed into a roar. And behind me, the crowned figure screamed a single, desperate warning. Do not let it take your name. But the wind had already begun pulling at me, trying to peel syllables from my mind, trying to carve letters from my bones. I stumbled forward, choking on a terror so profound it felt like drowning in my own memories. The train's horn blared, a sound like metal tearing through a throat, and just as the shadow of it fell over me, something inside my chest finally woke up. It opened its eyes. The valley froze, and everything, every voice, every bone, every empire, whispered one word. Ah, I didn't understand. But the thing inside me did. It stretched, the sky cracked, and the Bone Orchard screamed. The world held its breath, as if even this realm of bone and ruin feared what was unfolding inside me. The thing within my chest pressed upward, not painfully, but with the inevitability of something remembering its purpose after far too long. My breathing became shallow. The air around me thinned, trembling like a sheet pulled tight before tearing. The train's headlamp, hollow, lidless, searching, fixed on me. The crowned figure, far behind now, struggled to stand against the gale pulling everything toward the oncoming engine. He raised one arm as if to reach for me, but even his ancient bones bowed under the weight of whatever force my awakening had drawn out of the orchard. I felt it, no longer as something foreign but as a truth I had buried so deeply it had nearly fossilized within me. Presence. A memory. No, not a memory. A name. My name. Not the one carved on my ID. Not the one whispered casually by coworkers or repeated by strangers. This was older. Carved into storms, etched into iron, stitched into the dark. A name the Bone Orchard had been waiting centuries to reclaim. Lightning split the sky again, not in jagged forks but in cracks like fractures spreading across an old ceramic mask. Through those fissures, light, cold, bone-white, spilled downward, illuminating the dunes beneath me. And the realm reacted. Bones shifted, rolling like a sea caught in a tidal pull. Entire dune fields lifted and rearranged. Structures made from the relics of civilizations groaned and twisted toward me, as if compelled by instinct. The crowned figure's voice echoed over the cacophony. Do not speak it. If you speak it, you belong to the orchard forever. His words barely reached me. They felt small and frayed compared to the storm welling inside my ribs. The train screeched, the rails peeling up beneath it like torn roots. The front of the engine yawned open, impossibly wide, as if inviting, no, demanding, that I step inside. Something in me wanted to obey. Something in me recognized that yawning darkness, recognized the thunder of its heart, recognized the whisper in the wheels. Come home. I staggered backward. The wind sliced my face. My vision blurred. The roar of the orchard swelled until I could feel it vibrating my bones.
No, y whisperat.
The name inside me shuddered, displeased. I felt my spine pull tighter, like strings drawn through my vertebrae. I felt myself lean forward, step by step, toward that gaping engine mouth. Stormlight flickered over the dunes, and in that flicker I saw shapes, thousands of them, watching from the ridges and valleys. The forgotten dead, the ones the orchard had claimed. Their skulls glowed faintly, hollow and expectant, waiting to welcome me. I clenched my teeth. No, the presence inside me surged angrily, like claws scraping the inside of my ribs. I stumbled, dropped to my knees. The sky's fractures widened. The train roared. The voices of the dead began chanting my name, the name, though I refused to hear the final syllables. The crowned figure forced his way forward through the storm, each step ripping something loose from the ground. When he reached me, he knelt, gripping my shoulders with skeletal hands. "You must choose," he rasped. "Become what you were, or become what you want to be." "I don't know what I was," I gasped. "You do." His empty sockets stared into me more deeply than any living eyes ever could. "You are the Stormbinder, the Bonebreaker, the one who once commanded the orchard's hunger." My lungs froze. "You were its master." The revelation hit like a blow. The wind choked, the dunes stilled, and inside me the name pulsed again, proud, familiar, ancient. "But you left," the crowned figure continued, voice cracking. "You abandoned your throne. You abandoned us. The orchard has starved for centuries because of you." I shook my head violently, but something inside me trembled with memory. A memory of walking through these very dunes long ago, not as prey but as ruler. "I'm not that anymore. You can't escape what you were," he said. "Maybe not," I whispered, "but I can choose what I become." He stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly, achingly, he nodded, and he released my shoulders. The train shrieked again, impatient. Inside my chest, the presence clawed upward. I stood. Every bone in the orchard seemed to tilt toward me, waiting for my decision, for my surrender, for my return. I lifted my face to the cracked sky and inhaled. The storm filled my lungs. The name inside me surged upward, ready to tear free of my throat. I exhaled and pushed it back down. Lightning burst across the sky in a furious snarl. The ground split beneath my feet. The train's headlamp guttered, flickering in disbelief. The crowned figure whispered, almost reverently, "You refuse the orchard." "I refuse the throne," I said. The world shook. The presence inside me thrashed, howling in betrayal, but I forced it down deeper, deeper, down into the marrow where it had slept for centuries. And then, slowly, painfully, it quieted. The fractures in the sky began to seal. The dunes stopped trembling. The storm softened to a hush. The train wailed once more, a long, mournful sound that echoed across the entire valley, then began to reverse, bones splintering beneath its wheels, rails knitting themselves back together as it retreated into the fissures between worlds. The crowned figure looked at me with something like awe and grief. "You have exiled yourself," he said softly. "You can never return here again." "Good," I breathed. He bowed his head. The sky sealed completely. The dunes stilled, and beneath my feet, the ground dissolved into mist. I felt myself falling, not violently, but gently, like being lowered into a dream that no longer wanted to hold me. The crowned figure's final words followed me as the world swallowed me whole. "May your new name never be taken." The mist lifted. I opened my eyes on a quiet road outside town, rain easing into drizzle. No storm, no train, no bonus, just the world I had chosen, just me. And inside my chest, empty, finally empty. But as I walked home, far behind me, faint and distant as an echo swallowed by time, a train whistle sounded once. Mournful, hungry, and searching.